It was 2:47 a.m., and the only light in my office was the sterile blue glow of my laptop screen. The city outside was a blanket of silent, twinkling lights, oblivious to the storm brewing within these walls. My hands, usually so steady as they navigated complex lines of code, were trembling as I scrolled through messages that were not meant for my eyes. 8 years. 8 years building an empire, a life, a partnership with a man I thought I knew. And in a single, devastating moment, every foundation crumbled. She's become dead weight, Rebecca. Zara thinks she's untouchable because we're married, but I need someone hungry and ambitious beside me, not some comfortable wife who's lost her edge. The words sliced through me, sharper than any blade. They weren't just a betrayal, they were a complete redefinition of my existence. Comfortable wife who's lost her edge. Had I? Or had I simply poured every ounce of my edge, my ambition, my very being into his dream, into our company? The answer was a bitter pill. Rebecca's reply, a sickening echo of his contempt, landed like another blow. Once you fire her, we can finally be together openly. I can't wait to take over her position and show everyone what real talent looks like. Your wife is living in the past. I'm your future, baby. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about a secret affair. This was a meticulously planned corporate coup, disguised as a marital betrayal. The callousness, the entitlement, the sheer audacity of it left me breathless. He wasn't just discarding a wife. He was discarding a co-founder, a technical architect, the very bedrock of his supposed genius. And Rebecca, with her thinly veiled disdain, was ready to step into shoes she was utterly unqualified to fill, purely on the strength of her romantic entanglement. It was a classic tale, one that has played out countless times in boardrooms and bedrooms alike. The brilliant woman behind the scenes, overlooked, undervalued, and ultimately targeted for removal when her utility as a partner is deemed less important than a fleeting passion or a convenient narrative. Adrienne's next message sealed my fate, the nail in my professional coffin. Tomorrow, I'm calling the board meeting. I'll make up some story about her performance declining and recommend you as the new head of technology. By Friday, she'll be gone, and you'll be moving into our house. I already have the divorce papers ready. Divorce papers, already drafted. Not even the decency of a conversation, a confrontation, a final plea. Just a surgical strike designed to leave me with nothing. 6 months. 6 months of lies, of fake smiles, of his hand in mine while his mind meticulously plotted my obsolescence. 6 months of coming home to me, kissing me, telling me he loved me, all while systematically dismantling my life, my reputation, and my very identity. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, a cold, calculated act of professional murder. The worst part, and this is crucial to understand, wasn't the affair itself. Affairs are common, human failings, sometimes born of weakness, sometimes of genuine desire. But this was different. This was how they spoke about me. Dead weight. Lost her edge. Like the woman who had coded the very foundations of Cole Technologies, who had worked 18-hour days to build this company from nothing, was just some burden to be discarded. This dehumanization, this reduction of a skilled professional and devoted partner to an easily replaceable cog, was the true wound. It was a dismissal of my entire professional legacy, an erasure of my contributions, a denial of my very worth. Rebecca's smug confidence dripped from the screen. She'll probably cry and beg. Women like her always do when they realize they're not special anymore. And Adrienne's chilling affirmation, "Let her cry. By the time I'm done, everyone will see that you're the real brains behind our success. I'll make sure she can't find work anywhere in the tech industry. She'll be finished." Finished. The word echoed in the empty office, carrying the weight of a death sentence. It wasn't just about losing a job or a husband. It was about being systematically dismantled, professionally annihilated, rendered invisible in the industry I had dedicated my life to. But as I walked to the massive windows, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city below, a profound shift occurred within me. This building, this empire, this life, I had helped create all of it. Every twinkling light was a testament to sleepless nights, innovative solutions, and unwavering dedication. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own company ideas, to be Adrienne's perfect wife and business partner. And now, they thought I was weak. They thought I would cry and beg and disappear quietly into the night. They had no idea. They had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the woman who built the machine. This moment, this profound realization of being underestimated, is a crucible for many women in male-dominated industries, especially tech. We are often celebrated for our soft skills or support roles, while our technical prowess, our strategic thinking, and our sheer intellectual horsepower are frequently attributed to male counterparts or dismissed as mere assistants. I was not just an employee. I was the architect. I was not just a wife. I was a partner. To believe I would simply vanish after building the entire digital edifice was not just arrogant. It was foolish. It was a fundamental miscalculation of character, of capability, and of the profound resilience that can emerge when pushed to the brink. I walked back to my computer. No frantic anger, no desperate tears, just calm, methodical strokes. The emotions were there, a deep, icy river beneath the surface, but they were not in control. Control was the new currency. If Adrienne wanted to see what real talent looked like, I would show him. If he wanted to destroy my reputation and leave me with nothing, he would learn that the woman who built his digital empire could also burn it to the ground. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclamation. Reclamation of my narrative, my identity, and my rightful place as a formidable force in the tech world. The first step was digital forensics. I copied every single message, document, and file from his private accounts. This wasn't just about personal vendetta, it was about securing evidence. In the legal and corporate worlds, documentation is everything. My 8 years of marriage and partnership had given me unparalleled access to Adrienne's digital life. Passwords, access codes, business secrets. He trusted me completely, and that trust, a sacred bond, was about to become his downfall. It's a stark reminder that in an increasingly digital world, the lines between personal and professional can blur, and the most secure systems are often vulnerable through human trust. What I found was a web of deceit far more intricate than just the affair. Tax documents revealed massive offshore accounts, meticulously hidden from the IRS. Emails with clients exposed wildly inflated capabilities and blatant lies about project timelines. Evidence of stealing ideas from smaller companies and rebranding them as Cole Technologies innovations, a common, albeit unethical, practice in the cutthroat tech industry, but one that could lead to legal repercussions. Adrienne wasn't just a philanderer, he was a criminal. But the real treasure, the true ace up my sleeve, was in the system architecture. Every major program, every security protocol, every piece of critical infrastructure, I had designed it all. And like any good architect building a complex structure, I had been smart enough to build myself secret back doors into everything. Not for malicious purposes back then, never for a moment did I conceive of this scenario. They were merely a precaution, an emergency override, in case we ever needed urgent access for troubleshooting or disaster recovery. Now, those back doors, symbols of my foresight and expertise, were going to serve a very different, very destructive purpose. I spent the rest of the night creating my battle plan. Adrienne thought he was playing chess, a simple two-dimensional game of pawns and kings. He was about to discover that I had been playing 3D chess, moving pieces on multiple levels, anticipating every possible permutation, while he was still learning to move the pieces on the primary board. By sunrise, I had everything I needed: irrefutable evidence, unparalleled access, and most importantly, a plan. A plan that would destroy not just Adrienne's company, but his reputation, his fortune, and his freedom. Gathering my things, I headed home, where my loving husband was probably sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware, his phone undoubtedly buzzing with messages from his mistress. I walked into our bedroom and watched him for a moment. This man, who had promised to love and honor me, who had sworn we were partners in everything. It's a chilling exercise, standing over someone you once loved so deeply, now seeing them as a stranger, a betrayer, an adversary. The weight of that past love, juxtaposed with the stark reality of the present betrayal, is a heavy burden. "Good morning, beautiful," he said when his eyes opened, giving me that charming smile that had fooled me for so long. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, and it wasn't a lie. "I think I'm getting sick." The caring husband act was perfect, so practiced, so utterly convincing. It made the sting of his deceit even more profound. He offered for me to stay home, to rest. The irony was palpable. He was offering a moment of fake kindness while simultaneously orchestrating my professional demise. "No," I replied, managing a weak smile. "I'll be fine. We have that big presentation with the Henderson Group, remember? I wouldn't miss that." What I didn't tell him, what he couldn't possibly fathom, was that the Henderson Group presentation would be the last time he ever saw me in that office as his wife and partner. After today, everything would change. His perfect plan was about to become his perfect nightmare. I made coffee and toast, playing the role of the loving wife one last time. But inside, I was already gone. The woman who had loved and trusted Adrienne Cole was dead. In her place stood someone much more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. As I watched him eat breakfast, idly checking his phone for messages from Rebecca, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered his words. "Let her cry. She'll be finished." "We'll see about that, Adrienne. We'll see who finishes whom." This initial phase, the quiet, almost imperceptible transformation, is where the true power of strategic resilience lies. It's not about immediate, explosive reaction, but about controlled, calculated response. It's about channeling the raw, destructive energy of betrayal into a focused, constructive, for oneself, and destructive, for the betrayer force. The calm before the storm, the deceptive normalcy, is a vital part of the psychological warfare. It allows the unsuspecting adversary to continue their delusion of control, only to be utterly blindsided when the carefully laid traps begin to spring. Walking into Cole Technologies that morning, it was like any other day. I smiled at the receptionist, grabbed my usual coffee, and settled into my office. But this wasn't any other day. This was the opening act of the most important performance of my life. Adrienne was already in meetings, probably coordinating with Rebecca about my upcoming firing. I could see her through the glass walls of the conference room, leaning a little too close to my husband, her hand occasionally touching his arm. She was pretty, I had to admit. Blonde, tall, with the kind of aggressive ambition that looks appealing until you realize it's built on stepping over other people. Her energy was a stark contrast to my own, now cool and measured. My first task was to document everything. Every line of code, every project contribution, every innovation. If Adrienne was going to try to erase my legacy, I would make sure the truth was preserved. This wasn't about ego. It was about ensuring that my professional history, the tangible proof of my capabilities, remained untainted. In the corporate world, memory is often short, and narratives can be easily manipulated. A robust paper trail, or in this case, a digital one, is the best defense against historical revisionism. Then, I began implementing my insurance policies. Every major system in Cole Technologies ran through servers that I had personally configured. Over the years, I had built what I called maintenance tunnels, hidden pathways that would let me access any part of our network for troubleshooting and updates. Adrienne knew they existed in theory, but he had never bothered to learn the technical details. He trusted me to handle all of that. That trust, his blind reliance on my expertise, was about to cost him everything. It highlights a critical vulnerability in many organizations, the single point of failure inherent in relying too heavily on one person, especially in the absence of proper knowledge transfer and oversight. I spent the morning writing what appeared to be routine security updates. To anyone looking at the code, they were standard maintenance patches. But buried deep within the programming were my real additions, tiny programs that would lay dormant until activated, then give me complete control over every aspect of the company's digital infrastructure. It was like building hidden trapdoors and levers into the very foundation of a fortress, unbeknownst to its current occupant. "Working hard, I see," a voice purred from my doorway. I turned to find Rebecca standing there, holding a coffee cup, a smile plastered on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The wolf in sheep's clothing, or rather the ambitious newcomer cloaked in false cordiality. "Always," I replied pleasantly, keeping my voice even. "Just updating our security protocols. Can never be too careful in our business." She stepped into my office, uninvited, and perched on the edge of my desk, as if already testing out her new domain. The audacity was breathtaking. She was already planning how to reorganize my department before she even officially had my job. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone dripping with manufactured collegiality. "We should collaborate more. I have some ideas about streamlining our technology department." "That sounds interesting," I said, typing calmly, my fingers dancing across the keyboard, executing the very code that would later dismantle her plans. "What kind of streamlining did you have in mind?" "Well," she continued, taking a sip of her coffee, her eyes watching me carefully for any flicker of emotion, "I think we have too many redundant positions. Some people who might have been necessary in the early days but aren't really contributing at their full potential anymore." She was fishing, trying to gauge if I suspected anything, hoping for an outburst, a defensive reaction. Instead, I gave her my brightest, most saccharine smile. "You're absolutely right," I chirped. "Dead weight is so harmful to a growing company. I'm sure Adrienne appreciates having someone around who can spot that kind of problem." For just a moment, her confident mask slipped. She hadn't expected me to agree with her. "Exactly," she recovered quickly. "Adrienne values people who aren't afraid to make tough decisions." After she left, I continued my work. I accessed Adrienne's computer remotely and began copying files, all of his financial records, business communications, personal emails, everything. I also planted tiny monitoring programs that would record every keystroke, every email, every file he accessed. By lunchtime, I had built a complete surveillance network throughout the entire company. Every computer, every server, every communication device was now sending me copies of everything. If Adrienne was going to destroy me, I was going to document every moment of his betrayal, ensuring that his future downfall would be meticulously cataloged. I ate lunch alone in my office, watching through the glass walls as Adrienne and Rebecca shared a meal in the executive dining room. They sat close together, talking intensely, occasionally glancing toward my office, planning my downfall, no doubt. My phone buzzed with a text from Adrienne. "Board meeting at 3 p.m. Need you there to discuss the Q4 technology roadmap." I knew what this really meant. This was the meeting where he would announce my firing and Rebecca's promotion. The Q4 roadmap was just an excuse to get me in front of everyone so he could humiliate me publicly. The afternoon was spent making final preparations. Encrypted copies of every important file were stored in hidden locations across the internet. Anonymous email accounts and secure communication channels were set up. Most importantly, I activated all of my dormant programs and ran extensive tests to make sure everything worked perfectly. By 2:45 p.m., I was ready for war. I walked into the boardroom with a smile, carrying my laptop and a folder full of legitimate technology proposals. The board members were already there, 12 executives who had watched me help build this company from nothing. They respected me, trusted my judgment, valued my expertise. They had no idea they were about to witness my professional execution. Adrienne called the meeting to order and began with routine business updates. Then he smiled at the group, a practiced, confident smirk, and said, "Before we discuss the Q4 roadmap, I have an important announcement about our technology leadership." Here it comes, I thought, keeping my expression neutral and attentive. As our company continues to grow, we need leadership that can adapt to new challenges and opportunities. After careful consideration, I've decided to make some changes to our technology department structure. Several board members glanced at me with slight frowns. They could sense something was wrong, a disruption in the established order. This is a common phenomenon in corporate environments. Even before official announcements, the subtle shifts in body language, tone, and agenda can signal impending change. Effective immediately, Rebecca Hayes will be taking over as our new head of technology. Her fresh perspective and innovative approach will help us reach the next level of success. The room fell silent. I could see the shock and confusion on everyone's faces. 3 board members actually looked angry. Their expressions were priceless, a clear indication that Adrian's attempt at a smooth transition was already failing to land as he'd intended. Adrian, Jennifer Walsh, our longest-serving board member, interjected, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What about Zara? She built our entire technology infrastructure." "Zara has done good work in the past," Adrian replied smoothly, a practiced politician. "But her performance has been declining recently. She's become resistant to new ideas and stuck in outdated methodologies. It's time for fresh blood." Lies, all lies, designed to paint me as obsolete, as a relic of a bygone era. I sat there calmly, letting him dig his own grave with every word. My composed demeanor, I knew, was unsettling him, subverting his expectation of my emotional collapse. "That's ridiculous," snapped Robert Chin from accounting. "Zara's department has exceeded every target for 3 years running." The pushback from the board was gratifying. It showed that my contributions had indeed been recognized, that I wasn't the dead weight Adrian had so cruelly labeled me. "Nevertheless," Adrian continued, his voice hardening, revealing the true authoritarian behind the charm, "the decision has been made. Zara will be transitioning out of the company over the next 2 weeks. Finally, I spoke. "I understand completely, Adrian. You have to do what's best for the company." Everyone stared at me in shock. They had expected me to fight, to argue, to defend myself. Instead, I was graciously accepting my own professional execution. The surprise on Adrian's face was almost comical. He had prepared for a battle, not a surrender. "I'm glad you're being professional about this," Adrian said, looking slightly surprised, but pleased. He misinterpreted my calm as acquiescence, my dignity as weakness. He saw what he wanted to see. "Of course," I smiled. "I would never want to hold back Cole Technologies' success. When do you need me to finish the transition?" And that was when I saw the first flicker of doubt in his eyes. This was too easy. I was being too cooperative. But he couldn't back down now, not in front of the entire board. 2 weeks should be sufficient, he said. "Perfect. I'll make sure Rebecca has everything she needs to succeed." What I didn't tell anyone in that room was that I had just activated the final phase of my preparation. While Adrian was announcing my firing, hidden programs throughout the company's network were already beginning their work. The real show was about to begin. The seeds of destruction, meticulously planted, were starting to sprout. The next morning, I arrived at Cole Technologies knowing it would be my last day as Mrs. Adrian Cole, respected partner and technology leader. But I wasn't ready for the level of public humiliation Adrian had planned. He wasn't content with a quiet dismissal. He wanted a spectacle, a final act of dominance to reinforce his new narrative. "Good morning, Zara," said Patricia from HR, appearing at my office door at exactly 9:00 a.m. Behind her stood 2 security guards and Rebecca, who was carrying a box of office supplies. It was a scene straight out of a corporate drama, the universal symbol of a forced departure. The sheer awkwardness of the situation, the implicit shame, is a powerful tool of control. "We need to expedite your transition," Patricia continued awkwardly, her eyes darting away. "Adrian has decided that 2 weeks might create confusion about leadership roles." Translation: they wanted me gone immediately, so Rebecca could take over without any awkward questions about qualifications or experience. It was a move to minimize any potential resistance or lingering loyalty from the staff. "I understand," I said, beginning to pack my personal items into a small box. I moved slowly, deliberately, refusing to be rushed or flustered. Should I finish documenting the Henderson project handover first? This was a strategic question, an offer of continued professionalism, knowing full well it would be rejected. That won't be necessary, Rebecca interjected, setting her box down on my desk like she already owned it, her voice smug. I've been briefed on all current projects. Her self-assuredness, based on a fragile foundation of deception, was a fascinating thing to observe. The security guard stood there, looking profoundly uncomfortable. They knew me, had worked with me for years, and clearly didn't understand why they were being asked to escort me out like a criminal. "Mrs. Cole," one of them, Tony, said quietly, "we're sorry about this." It was a small human moment of empathy in a sea of corporate cruelty. "It's okay, Tony, just doing your job." Word had spread quickly through the office. As I packed my belongings, employees kept walking by my office, staring in shock. Many of them owed their jobs to me. I had hired them, trained them, fought for their promotions and raises. Now they were watching me get thrown out like garbage. It was a painful display, not just for me, but for them, seeing the arbitrary nature of power and the fragility of loyalty. Adrienne appeared in my doorway, flanked by 3 board members who looked deeply uncomfortable. He wanted an audience, a public spectacle of my fall. "Zara, I hope you understand this is purely a business decision," he said, loud enough for everyone in the nearby cubicles to hear. "Your contributions to the company have been adequate, but we need leadership that can take us to the next level." Adequate. 8 years of 18-hour days, of sacrificing my own dreams to build his empire, of being the technical genius behind every major breakthrough this company had achieved, and he called it adequate. The word was designed to diminish, to insult, to erase my value. "Of course, Adrienne," I replied serenely. "I want what's best for Cole Technologies." He looked frustrated by my calm response. He had wanted me to break down, to cry, to beg. Instead, I was maintaining perfect dignity while he looked like a heartless tyrant in front of his own employees. My composure was his undoing. "Rebecca will be taking over immediately," he continued, trying to regain control. "She'll need access to all of your files, passwords, and system documentation." This was the moment I had been preparing for. I handed Rebecca a USB drive containing what appeared to be complete system documentation and access codes. What she actually received was a carefully crafted collection of false information, obsolete passwords, and programs designed to fail at critical moments. It was a digital Trojan horse, beautiful on the surface but filled with hidden destruction. "Everything you need is on there," I said with a helpful smile. "The real passwords are in the encrypted files. The decryption key is New Beginnings 2024. The irony of that key phrase was almost too delicious. Rebecca practically snatched the drive from my hand. "Thank you. I'm sure I'll be in touch if I need any clarification." "Actually," Adrienne interjected, cutting her off, "we think it's better if there's a clean break. No contact with former employees about company business. Helps everyone move forward." In other words, he wanted to make sure I couldn't expose Rebecca's incompetence when she inevitably failed to understand systems that had taken me years to develop. He was trying to sever all ties, to eliminate any possibility of my interference, unknowingly playing directly into my hands. I finished packing while they watched. Family photos, a few books, my favorite coffee mug, my small succulent plant. 8 years of my life reduced to a single cardboard box. As I walked through the office toward the elevator, employees lined up along the corridor. Some looked angry, some looked sad, but all of them looked shocked. Sarah, from accounting, was actually crying. "This is wrong," she whispered as I passed. It was a powerful validation of my worth, a quiet rebellion against Adrienne's narrative. "Take care of yourself, Sarah," I replied, "and remember what I taught you about backing up your work." A subtle yet potent piece of advice. The elevator ride down felt eternal. 2 security guards, my cardboard box, and the weight of 8 years ending in betrayal. When we reached the lobby, I could see more employees pressed against the windows above, watching my departure. Adrienne and Rebecca were probably already in my office, going through my files, planning how to take credit for my work. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully erased me from Cole Technologies. They had no idea that I had just handed Rebecca a digital time bomb. The USB drive I gave her contained realistic-looking documentation that would work perfectly for about 2 weeks. long enough for everyone to think the transition was going smoothly, long enough for Adrian to look like he had made a smart decision. Then, gradually, systems would start failing. Programs would crash at the worst possible moments. Security protocols would malfunction during client presentations. And Rebecca, with no real technical background beyond basic marketing databases, would have no idea how to fix any of it. This period, the initial days post-firing, is often the most emotionally volatile for the betrayed. The temptation to lash out, to immediately reveal the truth, is immense. But true strategic revenge, or rather the systematic dismantling of a corrupt edifice, requires patience and precision. It's about letting the poison work slowly, ensuring that the target suffers not just a quick fall, but a prolonged, humiliating unraveling. The psychological impact of realizing your perfect plan is actually a trap. Slowly springing is far more potent than any immediate explosion. I drove home to the house I had shared with Adrienne for 5 years, the house where we had planned our future, where we had celebrated every business success, where I had trusted him completely. Walking through those rooms felt like visiting a museum of my former life. Each object, each corner, held a memory, now tainted by betrayal. I went to his home office and sat at the desk where he had probably drafted my termination paperwork. His computer was still logged in. He never worried about security at home because he trusted his wife completely. Another critical error, another blind spot. I spent 2 hours copying every file from his personal computer. Financial records, personal emails, business communications, photos, documents, everything. Then I installed monitoring software that would forward copies of all his future digital activity to secure accounts I had created. If Adrian wanted to destroy me, I was going to document every moment of his own downfall, ensuring a comprehensive, irrefutable record of his actions. The house felt too quiet, too full of memories that now meant nothing. I packed some clothes and essential items, then went to stay in a hotel. I couldn't bear to sleep in the bed I had shared with a man who had been planning my professional murder for months. That night, in my generic hotel room, I sat and watched the beginning of my revenge unfold in real time. Rebecca was already trying to access systems using the passwords I had given her. Most of them worked fine, initially. I wasn't ready to tip my hand yet, but I could see her confusion as she tried to navigate programs that were far more complex than anything she had worked with before. She sent Adrian 3 emails that first evening, asking for clarification about various technical procedures. He forwarded them to the IT support team with a note. Please assist Rebecca with any questions. She's still learning our systems. By the end of the week, Rebecca would be asking a lot more questions. By the end of the month, she would be desperate for help. And by the time they realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop it. I ordered room service and opened my laptop. Tomorrow, I would start building my new life. But tonight, I was going to watch Adrian Cole's empire begin its very slow, very public collapse. The woman who had loved and trusted him was gone forever. In her place was someone much more dangerous, someone who understood exactly how to destroy everything he cared about. Let the games begin. The strategic genius here lies in the understanding of human psychology and corporate dynamics. By allowing Rebecca to struggle for 2 weeks, I was effectively building a narrative of her incompetence. Adrienne, having publicly championed her, would be forced to defend her, thereby implicating himself further. This slow burn also prevented immediate suspicion of sabotage, making the eventual unraveling seem like a natural consequence of poor leadership and technical mismanagement. It was a meticulous process, far from the impulsive rage one might expect, demonstrating a profound understanding of how to wield power in the digital age. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls from Adrian and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. The last one, sent at 6:23 a.m., simply said, "Call me now, we need to talk." I made coffee in my hotel room and called him back at exactly 8 a.m., after I was sure he would be stressed and anxious from waiting. "Zara, thank God," he answered on the first ring, his voice betraying a hint of desperation. "We need to meet. There are some things we need to discuss about the separation." "What kind of things?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the house at noon? I could hear the tension in his voice, the carefully controlled panic. Something had happened, something that made him need to see me urgently. I'll be there, I said. When I arrived at what used to be our home, Adrienne's car was in the driveway along with a silver BMW I didn't recognize. I used my key to enter and found Adrienne in the living room with two men in expensive suits, lawyers from the look of them. Zara, these are my attorneys, Adrienne said without preamble, his face grim. We have some papers for you to sign. On the coffee table was a thick stack of documents. I sat down and began reading while the lawyers watched me carefully. It was a comprehensive divorce settlement that would give me essentially nothing. According to the papers, Adrienne would keep the house, both cars, all business assets, and our investment portfolio. I would receive a one-time payment of $50,000 and my personal belongings. The document also included a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from ever discussing Cole Technologies' business or making any disparaging statements about Adrienne or the company. This is generous, considering your employment was terminated for cause, one of the lawyers said, a condescending tone in his voice. Mr. Cole is being very fair. I looked up at Adrienne, who was pacing by the windows. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was a coward. Adrienne, I said quietly, my voice steady, we built that company together. Half of everything we have came from my work. It was a simple statement of fact, a challenge to his narrative of sole ownership. The company is in my name, he replied coldly, finally looking at me, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Your contributions were as an employee, not a partner. These documents reflect legal reality. It was the ultimate gaslighting, denying my very role in building his empire. What about the house? I helped pay for this house. Your contributions were minimal compared to the business profits that funded the purchase. Again, legal reality. I stared at this man who had shared my bed for 8 years, who had promised to love and honor me, who had sworn we were partners in everything. The person standing in front of me was a complete stranger. This transformation from loving partner to cold, calculating adversary is a brutal, yet common aspect of high-stakes divorces, especially when significant assets and power are involved. The legal system often prioritizes documented ownership over actual contribution, creating an imbalance that can be devastating for the less legally formalized partner. I need time to review these documents with my own lawyer, I said. Actually, the second attorney interjected, we need your signature today. There are time-sensitive business considerations that make delay inadvisable. Translation, they wanted me to sign before I could get proper legal representation or fully understand what I was giving up. They wanted to corner me, to leverage my presumed emotional vulnerability. What if I don't sign? Adrienne finally looked at me directly, and what I saw in his eyes was pure contempt. Then we go to court where you'll lose anyway, and you'll end up with even less after paying legal fees. The business is mine, Zara. You were just an employee who happened to be married to the boss. I looked around our living room. The furniture we had picked out together, the artwork we had collected on our anniversaries, the photos from happier times when I thought we were building something permanent together. All of it now felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The material possessions, once symbols of shared life, were now stark reminders of his betrayal and my diminished legal standing. You can have the house, I said finally, my voice unwavering, and the cars, and the money, but I'm not signing a non-disclosure agreement. The NDA was the crucial point. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the freedom to speak, to exist, to rebuild without being gagged. The NDA is non-negotiable, Adrienne said firmly. Sign it or you get nothing at all. I stood up slowly, leaving the unsigned papers on the coffee table. Then I get nothing at all. As I walked toward the door, Adrienne called after me. You're making a mistake, Zara. Don't be stupid about this. I turned back to face him one last time, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. Stupid is trusting someone who never deserved it. That evening, I moved my few belongings to a small furnished apartment across town. It was nothing like the luxury I had grown accustomed to, but it was mine. clean, quiet, and free from memories of betrayal. This forced transition from affluence to relative simplicity often brings clarity. Stripped of the superficial, one can focus on what truly matters: agency, self-respect, and the quiet satisfaction of independence. I spent the weekend setting up my new workspace and continuing to monitor Cole Technologies remotely. Rebecca was already struggling with basic system maintenance, sending confused emails to the IT support team almost hourly. She had managed to crash the customer database twice on Friday alone. Adrienne was covering for her, telling employees that she was implementing efficiency improvements that might cause temporary disruptions. But I could see the concern in his messages to board members. Things were not going as smoothly as he had promised. The cracks were forming, the foundation weakening. On Sunday night, I received an unexpected visitor. My doorbell rang at 9:00 p.m., and I opened it to find Rebecca Hayes standing in my hallway. She looked tired and stressed, very different from the confident woman who had taken over my office. The stress of incompetence, the relentless pressure of a role one isn't suited for, was clearly taking its toll. "We need to talk," she said, her voice strained. I let her in, curious to hear what she had to say. "I know you hate me," she began, a hint of desperation in her eyes, "and I understand why, but I need your help." "My help with what?" I asked, feigning mild curiosity. "The systems are more complicated than Adrienne told me they would be. Some of the documentation you left is unclear. I'm struggling to keep up with everything." I almost laughed. She had stolen my job, my husband, and my life, and now she wanted me to train her how to do the work she had claimed she was already qualified for. The sheer entitlement, the lack of self-awareness, was breathtaking. It's a classic example of someone believing they can simply take a position without earning the expertise required. "I'm sorry," I said pleasantly, "but Adrienne specifically told me there should be no contact with former employees about company business. I wouldn't want to violate his policies." I used his own words against her, a poetic turn. Her confident mask slipped completely. "Please, Zara, I'm drowning over there. I can't ask Adrienne for help because he expects me to already know this stuff. I can't ask the other employees because they all hate me for taking your job. You're the only one who understands these systems." "Then maybe you shouldn't have taken a job you weren't qualified for," I replied, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Look," she said, desperation creeping into her voice, "I know this situation is awkward, but Adrienne loves me, and I love him. We're going to get married. I'm going to be part of this company for a long time. Helping me succeed helps everyone." The audacity was truly breathtaking. She was asking me to help her succeed at stealing my life, rationalizing it with a self-serving narrative of shared future. It spoke volumes about her moral compass, or lack thereof. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said, a faint smile on my lips. "When's the wedding?" "We haven't set a date yet, but soon. Adrienne wants to make everything official." I walked to the door and held it open. "I think you should leave now." She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps hoping I would change my mind. When she realized I wasn't going to help her, her expression hardened. "Fine," she said, her voice laced with venom. "But you're making an enemy out of someone who could have been an ally. Adrienne has a lot of influence in this industry." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's reality. Play nice, or you'll regret it." After she left, I sat in my small apartment and smiled for the first time in days. Rebecca was already cracking under pressure, and I hadn't even started the real sabotage yet. She had no idea that everything she was struggling with now was just the warm-up act. The main event was still to come. The confrontation, while tense, had provided immense satisfaction. It confirmed her fragility, her dependence, and her utter lack of foresight. My refusal to engage, to be manipulated, was a powerful assertion of my newfound autonomy. Living in my small apartment surrounded by boxes and the remnants of my former life, I spent the next week mapping out every detail of Adrienne's destruction. I had lost weight, sleeping only a few hours each night, but my mind had never been clearer. Revenge, or rather the pursuit of justice through strategic means, required precision, patience, and perfect planning. It was no longer a personal vendetta. It had evolved into a meticulous intellectual exercise, a complex puzzle to solve. I spread printouts across my kitchen table, organizational charts, financial records, client contracts, system architecture diagrams, everything I needed to understand exactly how to bring down Cole Technologies without leaving any trace back to me. The company had 3 critical vulnerabilities that Adrian had never bothered to secure properly because he trusted me to handle all technical security. First, the client data management system that stored sensitive information for major corporations. Second, the financial processing software that handled millions of dollars in transactions daily. Third, the backup and recovery systems that were supposed to protect everything. I had built all of these systems with hidden administrative access that only I knew about. They were designed to be undetectable and virtually impossible to remove without completely rebuilding everything from scratch, something that would take months and cost millions. But destruction wasn't enough. I wanted Adrian to suffer the way he had made me suffer. I wanted him to lose everything that mattered to him: his money, his reputation, his freedom, and his precious Rebecca. This wasn't merely about hitting reset. It was about ensuring accountability for actions that had profound destructive consequences on my life. The plan was segmented into 3 interconnected phases. The first phase would target Rebecca directly. I would make her look incompetent and unreliable, turning Adrienne's board of directors against her. This was crucial for establishing the narrative of internal failure, deflecting any suspicion from external sabotage. The second phase would expose Adrienne's financial crimes to federal investigators. This was the long game, leveraging the mountain of evidence I had painstakingly collected. The third phase would destroy the company's ability to function, driving away clients and investors. By the time I was finished, Cole Technologies would be a smoking crater, and Adrian would be in federal prison. I started with Rebecca's email account. She was using the same password for everything, her birthday, plus her initials like an amateur. Within minutes, I had complete access to all her communications. This lack of basic cybersecurity hygiene is surprisingly common, even among those in positions of power, highlighting a dangerous vulnerability in many organizations. Reading through her messages, I discovered something interesting. Rebecca wasn't just incompetent, she was actively embezzling money from the company. She had been inflating vendor invoices and keeping the difference, skimming from petty cash accounts, and charging personal expenses to the company credit card. It was small-scale theft compared to Adrian's major financial crimes, but it was documented proof that his precious new girlfriend was a criminal. Even better, her sloppy methods meant she had left a clear paper trail that any competent investigator would find easily. I also found messages between Rebecca and her friends where she bragged about landing the rich husband and described her plans to get rid of his boring wife and take over everything. She had screenshots of our house, our cars, even photos of jewelry that she planned to inherit after the divorce. The woman wasn't just stealing my life. She had been planning it like a military campaign, a calculated conquest. But the most valuable discovery was in her communications with Adrian. He'd been lying to the board about Rebecca's qualifications, forging recommendation letters, and actually having other employees do her work while she took credit. He was so obsessed with this woman that he was committing fraud to make her look competent. This revealed not just his infatuation, but his blatant disregard for corporate ethics and the rule of law. I printed everything and organized it into neat files. Phase 1 of my revenge would be anonymously sending all of this evidence to the board of directors, the IRS, and the FBI. Let them sort out how much damage Adrian was willing to accept to protect his criminal girlfriend. This indirect approach was vital. It allowed the legitimate authorities to act on concrete evidence, ensuring that the consequences were legally sound and not merely an act of personal vengeance. Phase 2 required more sophisticated planning. Adrian's major financial crimes were hidden in offshore accounts and shell corporations that I had helped him set up back when I thought we were building a legitimate business together. He had been evading taxes for years, hiding profits and paying bribes to secure government contracts. The evidence was stored in encrypted files on his personal computer, protected by passwords that only he knew, except that I had installed monitoring software that recorded every keystroke he made, including those passwords. I spent 3 days copying and organizing 5 years' worth of financial crimes. Tax evasion totaling over $8 million, bribery of federal officials, money laundering through fake consulting contracts, embezzlement from company pension funds. Any one of these crimes would put Adrian in federal prison for years. All of them together would guarantee he spent the rest of his life behind bars. The sheer scale of his deceit was staggering, confirming that his moral corruption extended far beyond his marital infidelity. Phase 3 was the most complex because it required destroying Cole Technologies without hurting the innocent employees who still worked there. I didn't want Sarah from accounting or Tony from security to lose their jobs because of Adrian's crimes. So I developed a plan that would gradually drive away the company's major clients while preserving the smaller accounts and individual employees' reputations. The key was making it look like Adrian's leadership was failing, not sabotaging the workers themselves. This distinction was crucial for maintaining my own ethical compass and ensuring that my actions were focused on justice, not indiscriminate destruction. I identified the 12 largest corporate clients that generated 80% of Cole Technologies' revenue. Each one had specific technical requirements and performance standards that were spelled out in their contracts. If the company failed to meet those standards, the clients could terminate their agreements without penalty. I wrote programs that would cause subtle but critical failures in the services provided to these major clients. Nothing dramatic, just consistent problems that would make the clients lose confidence in the company's reliability. Database queries that ran slightly slower than specified. Security updates that were delayed by just enough to violate contract terms. Backup systems that worked perfectly but generated false error reports. Each client would experience different problems at different times, making it impossible to identify a pattern or single cause. It would just look like Cole Technologies was falling apart under Adrian's leadership. The beauty of this approach was that it would take months to fully destroy the company, giving employees time to find new jobs while systematically dismantling Adrian's empire. By Friday of that week, I had everything ready. 3 phases of calculated action that would unfold over the next 6 months, each designed to cause maximum damage to Adrian and Rebecca while protecting everyone else. I sealed the evidence files in multiple envelopes addressed to the FBI, IRS, SEC, and every member of Cole Technologies' board of directors. Then I wrote a detailed letter explaining exactly who Adrian Cole really was and what he had done to his wife, his company, and his investors. The letters would be mailed from different locations over the next month, creating the impression that multiple whistleblowers were coming forward independently. By the time investigators started looking into Adrian's activities, they would find so much evidence that building a case would be effortless. I made myself dinner and ate it slowly, savoring the anticipation of what was coming. Tomorrow, I would mail the first batch of evidence and activate the initial programs that would begin Rebecca's professional downfall. Adrian thought he had won. He thought he had successfully discarded his inconvenient wife and replaced her with a younger, more exciting model. He had no idea that the woman he had betrayed was about to become his worst nightmare. The real game was about to begin, and I was playing to win. This meticulously planned sequence of events wasn't just about inflicting pain, it was about restoring balance, asserting truth, and ultimately, finding a path to my own liberation and new beginnings. Monday morning, I mailed the first batch of evidence from a post office across town. 3 packages containing proof of Rebecca's embezzlement and Adrian's fraudulent hiring practices addressed to different board members. I had timed everything carefully. They would arrive on Wednesday, giving me 2 days to set up the technical side of my plan. From my apartment, I logged into Cole Technologies' network using my hidden back doors and began implementing Phase 1. I started small, with subtle problems that would make Rebecca look incompetent without causing major damage to the company. The first target was the Henderson Group presentation that Rebecca was supposed to deliver on Wednesday. It was a $2.3 million contract renewal that should have been routine, but I made sure it would be anything but. I programmed the presentation software to randomly skip slides, display incorrect data charts, and crash at critical moments. To anyone investigating later, it would look like Rebecca had used outdated software or failed to properly test her equipment, a perfect example of digital misdirection. Next, I targeted the customer service database that Rebecca was supposed to have updated with new client information. I introduced subtle errors that would cause lookup failures and generate incorrect reports. Again, it would appear to be the result of poor training or carelessness on Rebecca's part. The goal wasn't to crash the entire system immediately, but to create a consistent, frustrating, and ultimately career-damaging pattern of technical difficulties that could only be attributed to her direct handling. Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Zara, it's Patricia from HR. I hope you're doing well." Patricia had always been kind to me, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice. "I'm fine, Patricia. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling because we've had some irregularities in the transition process. Some of the documentation you left for Rebecca seems to have gaps or errors. Would you be willing to consult on a few technical issues?" So it was starting already. Rebecca was failing so badly that they were swallowing their pride and asking for my help. It was a clear sign that my subtle sabotage was working precisely as intended. "I'm sorry, Patricia," I replied, maintaining a professional but firm tone. "But Adrienne made it very clear that there should be no contact between me and the company. I wouldn't want to violate his policies." Again, using his own rules against them. "Yes, but this is really just a one-time consultation. We could pay you as an independent contractor. Has Adrienne approved this?" There was a pause. "Not exactly, but Rebecca is struggling, and we have some important presentations this week." I almost felt sorry for Patricia. She was caught between Adrienne's ego and Rebecca's incompetence, trying to prevent a disaster that was going to happen regardless. "I understand your situation, Patricia, but I can't help. Adrienne was very specific about wanting a clean break." After hanging up, I checked my monitoring programs and saw exactly what was happening. Rebecca had spent Monday trying to prepare for the Henderson presentation, but the technical problems were making it impossible. She had sent increasingly frantic emails to the IT support team, but they couldn't help her because the problems were buried too deep in the system architecture for them to find. This was the beauty of my carefully crafted maintenance tunnels and dormant code, virtually undetectable by anyone without my specific knowledge. Wednesday morning, I watched the disaster unfold in real time through the company's security cameras, which I could access remotely. Rebecca arrived early, looking nervous but determined. She spent an hour testing her presentation equipment, and everything worked perfectly. I had programmed the failures to start only when she was in front of the clients. This added another layer of psychological torment, making her feel confident just before her world crashed down. At 10:03 a.m., the Henderson Group executives arrived. 5 people in expensive suits who represented one of Cole Technologies' most important accounts. Adrienne greeted them personally and introduced Rebecca as our new technology leader and the architect of our future success. The hyperbole was almost laughable given the truth. The presentation started normally. Rebecca looked confident and professional as she began explaining the proposed contract renewal. Then, 15 minutes in, everything began to fall apart. First, the presentation software skipped 3 critical slides, jumping directly from the introduction to the budget summary without showing any of the technical specifications. Rebecca tried to go back, but the software froze completely. "I'm sorry," she said, her confidence already wavering. "Let me restart this." While she rebooted her laptop, I activated the second phase of the sabotage. When she tried to access the client database to show Henderson Group's usage statistics, the system returned error messages claiming that their account could not be found. "That's strange," Rebecca muttered, typing frantically. "The system seems to be having some technical difficulties." One of the Henderson executives checked his watch impatiently. "Miss Hayes, we only have an hour for this meeting. Perhaps you should have tested your equipment beforehand." "Of course I did test everything," Rebecca replied, sweat beginning to show on her forehead. I'm not sure what's causing these problems." Adrienne stepped in, trying to salvage the situation. "I apologize for the technical difficulties. Rebecca, why don't you continue with the presentation manually while IT resolves these issues?" But Rebecca had prepared a presentation that relied heavily on data visualizations and technical demonstrations. Without her slides and database access, she was completely lost. She began stumbling through an improvised explanation of services that she clearly didn't understand, using incorrect technical terms and making promises about capabilities that Cole Technologies didn't actually have. The Henderson executives exchanged concerned glances. The professional facade was crumbling rapidly. After 30 minutes of watching Rebecca struggle, the lead executive stood up. "Mr. Cole, we've been working with your company for 3 years, and we've never seen this level of unpreparedness. We'll need to reconsider our contract renewal." They left without signing anything. A $2.3 million deal lost because Rebecca couldn't deliver a simple presentation. Adrienne's face was white with fury as the elevator doors closed behind the Henderson Group. He turned to Rebecca, and I could see him struggling to control his temper in front of the other employees. "My office now." Through the building security system, I watched them argue behind closed doors. Adrienne was pacing angrily while Rebecca tried to explain what had happened. She kept insisting that the technical problems weren't her fault, that someone must have sabotaged the systems. She was right, of course, but she had no way to prove it. The argument lasted for over an hour. When Rebecca finally left Adrienne's office, she looked shaken and defeated. She went straight to the bathroom where I watched her cry for 10 minutes before composing herself and returning to work. That afternoon, I received reports from my monitoring programs that Rebecca had sent resume updates to 3 different headhunting firms. She was already looking for an escape route less than 2 weeks into her new job. But the real fireworks started when the board members received their packages. At 4:47 p.m., Jennifer Walsh called an emergency board meeting for Thursday morning. The subject line of her email was simply, "Urgent personnel matter." Adrienne had no idea what was coming. He thought the Henderson Group disaster was just bad luck, that Rebecca would improve with more experience, that everything would work out fine. He was about to learn that his problems were just beginning. Wednesday night, I ordered pizza and watched the security footage from Adrienne's office. He was working late, probably trying to figure out how to fix the relationship with Henderson Group. He looked stressed and tired, older than his 35 years. Good. Let him worry. Let him wonder what was going wrong with his perfect plan. Tomorrow, when the board confronted him with evidence of Rebecca's crimes and his own fraudulent hiring practices, the real pain would begin. I was just getting started. This quiet observation, the detached analysis of his suffering, was a testament to the profound shift within me. It wasn't about raw emotion. It was about the meticulous execution of a plan, a cold calculation of justice. Thursday morning arrived with the emergency board meeting that would change everything. I had positioned myself at a coffee shop across from Cole Technologies, with a clear view of the building's entrance, watching through binoculars as board members arrived, looking grim and determined. Jennifer Walsh was the first to arrive at 7:30 a.m., carrying a thick folder, undoubtedly the evidence package I had mailed her. Robert Chin and Margaret Foster arrived together, both looking serious and speaking in hushed tones. The silent anticipation in the air was palpable, even from a distance. Adrienne arrived at 8:45 a.m., clearly unaware that his world was about to collapse. He looked confident, probably thinking this meeting was about damage control for the Henderson Group disaster. Rebecca wasn't with him. She wouldn't be invited to a meeting about her own criminal activities. The arrogance of his ignorance was almost poetic. Through my remote access to the building's conference room cameras, I watched the meeting unfold. Jennifer Walsh called the meeting to order and immediately placed a stack of documents on the conference table. "Adrienne, we've received some very disturbing information about your recent hiring decisions and the conduct of your new technology director." Adrienne's confident expression flickered. "What kind of information?" "Evidence that Rebecca Hayes has been embezzling company funds and that you falsified her employment qualifications to justify her hiring." The color drained from Adrienne's face. He knew. The illusion was shattered. That's ridiculous. Who would make such accusations? He stammered, still trying to bluff his way out. Multiple anonymous sources, Robert Chin replied, opening his own folder. All with detailed documentation and proof. Financial records, forged recommendation letters, email communications discussing the fraud. The weight of undeniable evidence, meticulously gathered, was crushing his denials. Margaret Foster leaned forward. Adrian, did you or did you not create fake employment references for Ms. Hayes? I may have enhanced her qualifications slightly, but that's not uncommon in hiring practices. He clung to a flimsy defense, a desperate attempt to normalize his criminal behavior. Enhanced? Jennifer's voice was sharp, cutting through his pretense. You invented an entire employment history at a company that doesn't exist. You forged signatures from executives who never heard of her. That's not enhancement, that's fraud. Adrian was sweating now, his composure completely gone. Even if there were some irregularities in the hiring process, that doesn't justify these attacks on Rebecca. She's learning the job. Learning the job while stealing from the company, Chin said, sliding a financial report across the table. She's embezzled over $47,000 in the past 6 months through fake vendor invoices and personal charges to company accounts. I watched Adrian's face crumble as he realized the scope of what they had discovered. He'd been so focused on protecting Rebecca's image that he hadn't bothered to monitor her actual activities. The irony was exquisite. There must be some mistake, he said weakly. The only mistake was trusting your judgment, Jennifer replied coldly. We're terminating Miss Hayes immediately and referring her case to law enforcement. We're also conducting a full audit of your hiring and management practices. You can't do that without my approval. I'm the CEO, he exclaimed, his voice rising in panic. Actually, according to our corporate bylaws, the board can take emergency action when there's evidence of executive malfeasance, which there clearly is. His reign was over. The meeting continued for another hour, with Adrian becoming increasingly desperate as the board members presented evidence of his fraudulent activities. They had everything: the forged documents, the embezzlement records, even copies of Rebecca's bragging messages about landing a rich husband. The narrative he had so carefully constructed was being torn to shreds by the very people he had tried to manipulate. By the end of the meeting, Adrian was facing suspension pending a full investigation. Rebecca was fired and potentially facing criminal charges, and the board had voted to hire an independent auditing firm to examine the company's finances. I packed up my surveillance equipment and drove home, checking my phone for updates from the monitoring software I had installed throughout the building. At 11:23 a.m., Adrian sent Rebecca a frantic text. Emergency! They know everything. Don't come to the office. Her reply came back immediately. What do you mean they know everything? No, what? The embezzlement, the fake references, all of it. You need to get a lawyer. There was a long pause before her next message. This is your fault. You said everything was handled. You said I was safe. The blame game had begun, the fragile alliance of deceit collapsing under pressure. We'll figure this out. Just stay calm and don't talk to anyone. Don't tell me to stay calm. My career is ruined because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. Their text conversation continued throughout the day, becoming increasingly hostile as Rebecca realized that Adrian couldn't protect her from the consequences of her actions. By evening, she was threatening to expose his other illegal activities if he didn't find a way to fix the situation. But Adrian had much bigger problems than Rebecca's threats. The board-ordered audit was going to uncover his offshore accounts, his tax evasion, and his embezzlement from company pension funds. The federal investigation was going to destroy him. I had timed the anonymous tips to arrive at different agencies over the next few weeks, creating the impression that multiple whistleblowers were coming forward independently. The FBI would receive their evidence package on Monday, the IRS would get theirs on Wednesday, the SEC would receive theirs the following Monday. Each package contained enough evidence to justify a full investigation, and all of them together would create an overwhelming case against Adrian. He was going to face charges for tax evasion, fraud, embezzlement, bribery, and money laundering. The web of deceit was finally tightening around him. Thursday evening, I treated myself to dinner at an expensive restaurant. The kind of place Adrienne used to take me for anniversaries, back when I thought our marriage was real. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was celebrating his downfall in the same restaurant where he had proposed 8 years earlier. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "I'm having dinner. What are you doing?" "This isn't over, Zara. Adrienne will figure out that you're behind this." It had to be Rebecca, probably using a burner phone. I was impressed that she had figured it out so quickly, though it wasn't really surprising. I was the only person with both the motive and the technical skills to orchestrate this kind of systematic destruction. "Behind what?" I replied. "I'm just a divorced woman trying to rebuild her life." "Cut the act. You're sabotaging the company and framing us for crimes." "If you're innocent, I'm sure the investigation will clear you." There was no response for several minutes. "Then you're going to regret this. Adrienne has connections. He can make sure you never work again." I almost laughed. Adrienne was about to be a federal prisoner, and she was still threatening me with his influence in the tech industry. The delusion was astounding. "Good luck with that," I typed back, then blocked the number. The conversation, though brief, was a final, satisfying confirmation that my message was being received, even if the sender was in denial. Friday morning brought new developments. Adrienne had hired a high-priced criminal defense attorney and was already trying to distance himself from Rebecca's crimes. According to my monitoring software, he had spent Thursday night deleting files and trying to cover his tracks. Unfortunately for him, I had copies of everything he had deleted, and his attempts to destroy evidence would only make him look more guilty when investigators found the digital forensics trail. This is a common mistake for those attempting to cover up digital crimes. Deletions leave trails, and professional forensics experts are adept at uncovering them. The board meeting minutes, which I intercepted from Jennifer Walsh's email, showed that Cole Technologies was in serious trouble. The audit was already uncovering financial irregularities. Major clients were reconsidering their contracts, and employee morale was at an all-time low. Several key employees had already submitted resignation letters, including Sarah from accounting and 3 senior developers who had worked directly with me. They were smart enough to recognize that the company was sinking and didn't want to go down with it. By the end of the week, Cole Technologies had lost 2 major clients, faced 3 separate government investigations, and seen its stock price drop by 30%. Adrienne's empire was crumbling faster than I had expected. But this was still just the beginning. The real destruction would come when the federal agencies started their formal investigations and when my technical sabotage programs moved into their next phase. Adrienne thought he was fighting for his business and his freedom. He had no idea that he had already lost both. The woman he had betrayed and discarded was systematically destroying everything he had ever cared about, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Justice was finally coming, and it was going to be beautiful. The following Monday brought exactly what I had been waiting for. FBI agents walking into Cole Technologies with search warrants and boxes for evidence collection. I watched from my usual surveillance position as federal investigators spent 8 hours copying files, interviewing employees, and seizing computer equipment. Adrienne's expensive lawyer was there within an hour, but it was too late. The anonymous tips I had sent were so detailed and well documented that the FBI had been able to get warrants for everything: computers, financial records, offshore account information, personal communications. This is a testament to the power of meticulous planning and irrefutable evidence. Through my monitoring systems, I watched Adrienne pace his office like a caged animal, while agents methodically dismantled his digital empire. They copied every file, every email, every financial transaction from the past 5 years. His tax evasion schemes, his bribery payments, his embezzlement from employee pension funds, all of it was now in federal hands. Rebecca had already fled town according to the GPS tracking on her phone that I had been monitoring. She was in Florida, probably trying to hide assets before the government could freeze them. But she had made the mistake of using her credit cards, creating a perfect trail for investigators to follow. The FBI raid made national news by Tuesday morning. Tech CEO under federal investigation for fraud and embezzlement. read the headline in the business section. The article mentioned that Adrienne's wife had recently been terminated from the company amid management restructuring, though it didn't make the connection to the timing of the investigation. To the public, it looked like a consequence of Adrienne's management, not a targeted intervention. By Wednesday, 3 more major clients had terminated their contracts with Kohl Technologies. The Anderson Corporation pulled their $4.8 million annual contract. Peterson Industries canceled a $3.2 million software development project. Morrison Financial ended their $2.1 million data management agreement. Each cancellation cited concerns about the stability and reliability of Kohl Technologies' leadership as the reason for termination. In reality, they were responding to the technical problems I had been introducing into their systems. Subtle failures designed to make them lose confidence in the company's abilities. The beauty of my approach was that each client experienced different problems at different times, making it impossible to identify a pattern. Anderson Corporation's database queries had been running progressively slower for weeks. Peterson Industries had been receiving false security alerts. Morrison Financial's backup systems had been generating fake error reports. None of these problems caused actual data loss or security breaches, but they created the impression that Kohl Technologies was becoming unreliable. Combined with the negative publicity from the federal investigation, it was enough to drive away even longtime clients who had previously been satisfied with the company's services. This strategy of creating doubt and perceived instability is a powerful, non-attributable form of corporate sabotage. Thursday brought more bad news for Adrienne. The IRS arrived with their own search warrants, focusing specifically on his tax records and offshore accounts. I had provided them with detailed information about 8 years of tax evasion, including account numbers, transaction records, and evidence of deliberately underreported income. Adrienne's net worth was approximately $40 million, but he had only been reporting income that would justify a lifestyle worth maybe $8 million. The difference was hidden in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, carefully structured to avoid U.S. tax obligations. The IRS agent spent 3 days at Kohl Technologies going through financial records with forensic accountants. They also raided Adrienne's personal home, the house where I had lived and loved and trusted for so many years. I drove by that afternoon and saw government vehicles in the driveway, agents carrying boxes of documents and computer equipment. Our neighbors were standing in their yards, watching the spectacle of Adrienne Kohl's fall from grace. Patterson from next door actually waved to me when she saw my car. She had always liked me better than Adrienne. By Friday, the situation had become desperate enough that Adrienne was willing to swallow his pride and contact me directly. My phone rang at 6:47 p.m. with a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Zara, please don't hang up." Adrienne's voice sounded broken, exhausted. This wasn't the confident billionaire CEO who had fired me 3 weeks earlier. This was a man watching his entire world collapse. "What do you want, Adrienne?" My voice was calm, steady, devoid of the emotional turmoil he expected. "I know you're behind this. I don't know how, but I know it's you." "Behind what? Your criminal activities? I had nothing to do with your decision to evade taxes and embezzle money." I feigned innocence, twisting the knife. "The timing is too convenient. The investigation starts right after I let you go. The technical problems that are driving away our clients, the anonymous tips that contain information only you would have access to." He wasn't wrong, but he couldn't prove any of it. I had been too careful, too methodical. Every piece of evidence against him was real. Every technical failure could be explained by legitimate system problems. Every anonymous tip could have come from any number of disgruntled employees or former business partners. My plan was airtight. "Adrienne, you fired me and threw me out of the company I helped build. You divorced me and left me with nothing. Why would I waste my time and energy trying to hurt you when I'm busy rebuilding my own life?" "Because you're angry. Because you want revenge." "I was angry," I admitted. "But revenge? That would require me to care enough about you to want to cause you pain. I don't. You're just not that important to me anymore." The silence on the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Adrienne finally spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Zara. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong. But please, if you have any feelings left for the man you married, don't destroy everything we built together." The plea, steeped in self-pity and thinly veiled manipulation, was too late. "We didn't build anything together, Adrian. You made that very clear when you fired me. According to you, I was just an employee who happened to be married to the boss." Your words. "I was wrong. I was stupid and selfish and wrong. But hundreds of people work for this company. Good people who don't deserve to lose their jobs because of my mistakes. You should have thought about that before you committed federal crimes." My voice remained flat, impassive. "Zara, please tell me what you want. Money, I'll give you half of everything. The house, it's yours. Just please stop this." "I don't want anything from you, Adrienne. I never did. All I ever wanted was for you to love me and be faithful to me and treat me like an equal partner. But you couldn't do that, could you? I can change. We can fix this." "No, we can't. And I wouldn't want to, even if we could." I hung up and turned off my phone. Adrian had finally realized that he was fighting for his life. But it was far too late. The federal investigations were already underway. The company was hemorrhaging clients and employees, and his reputation was permanently destroyed. His desperate plea, his belated offer, held no power over me. His attempt to buy his way out of the consequences, to rekindle a past that was irrevocably broken, was futile. This was not about negotiation. It was about the inevitable march of consequences. Over the weekend, I implemented the final phase of my technical sabotage. Instead of subtle problems designed to drive away clients gradually, I unleashed programs that would cause immediate and catastrophic system failures. On Monday morning, Cole Technologies would experience the kind of complete digital meltdown that would make recovery impossible. Every major system would crash simultaneously. All backup systems would fail, and months of work would be lost forever. It would look like a combination of hardware failures and cyber attacks from external sources. No one would ever be able to prove that the destruction came from inside the company's own infrastructure. Adrienne had betrayed me, divorced me, and tried to erase me from the company I had helped create. He had called me dead weight and claimed that my contributions were merely adequate. On Monday morning, he would learn exactly what my contributions had been worth. The empire I had built was about to become the weapon I used to destroy the man who had never deserved it. This final act of digital destruction was not just punitive, it was symbolic. It demonstrated the true depth of my capabilities, the very skills he had so cruelly dismissed. It was the ultimate mic drop, a silent, devastating declaration of my unparalleled technical prowess. Monday morning arrived with the digital apocalypse I had been planning for weeks. At exactly 9:00 a.m., every critical system at Cole Technologies crashed simultaneously. The customer database corrupted itself, the financial processing software locked up completely, and the backup systems failed to restore anything. I watched the chaos unfold through the building security cameras from my apartment, eating breakfast while Adrian's world burned. Employees were running between offices, phones were ringing constantly, and IT support staff were pulling their hair out trying to understand what was happening. The sheer pandemonium was a symphony of his undoing. Adrian arrived at 8:30 a.m. to find his building in complete pandemonium. The elevators weren't working properly. The electronic keycard system was malfunctioning, and even the coffee machines were displaying error messages. By 10:00 a.m., every major client had been affected. The Morrison financial payroll system had crashed during processing, leaving thousands of employees without paychecks. The Anderson Corporation's inventory management system had wiped 6 months of data. Peterson Industries' customer service platform was completely inaccessible. The phones were ringing constantly with angry clients demanding explanations and threatening lawsuits. Adrian held an emergency meeting with his remaining senior staff, but none of them could explain what was happening or how to fix it. Through my monitoring software, I could see the increasingly desperate emails Adrian was sending to every IT consultant and recovery specialist in the city. But the problems were too deep, too fundamental. I had designed the failures to cascade through every interconnected system, creating a digital house of cards that collapsed completely once the first piece fell. It was an elegant, devastating solution. By noon, the story had leaked to the press. Kohl Technologies suffers massive system failure amid federal investigation, was the headline on the local business website. The article speculated that the company might be the victim of a cyber attack, possibly related to the ongoing criminal investigation. Adrienne's lawyer issued a statement claiming that the system failures were clearly the result of malicious outside interference and demanded a federal investigation into potential cyber terrorism. It was a desperate attempt to shift blame away from his client's own criminal activities. But I had been too careful for that approach to work. Every piece of malicious code I had planted was designed to look like legitimate system maintenance or natural hardware failures. Digital forensics experts would find evidence of system degradation over time, not sudden sabotage. The evidence of his guilt was now deeply embedded, even in the very chaos itself. Tuesday brought even worse news. The SEC had opened a formal investigation into Kohl Technologies' financial reporting, focusing specifically on Adrienne's use of offshore accounts to hide company profits. The agency had received detailed anonymous tips about securities fraud and investor deception. 3 more clients canceled their contracts, citing the system failures and concerns about the company's viability. Kohl Technologies was now operating with less than 30% of its previous revenue stream. Employee resignations were accelerating. Sarah from accounting had already found a new job. Tony from security was interviewing with other firms. Even Adrienne's personal assistant, who had worked with him for 4 years, submitted her 2 weeks' notice. The company was hemorrhaging, internally and externally. Wednesday brought the moment I had been waiting for. Federal agents arrested Rebecca Hayes at her Florida hotel, charging her with embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Her mugshot appeared on news websites by evening, blonde hair disheveled, makeup smeared, looking nothing like the confident woman who had stolen my job. According to the arrest report, Rebecca had been caught trying to transfer money from hidden accounts to offshore banks. She had also been recorded by federal wiretaps discussing plans to flee the country with stolen company funds. The arrest warrant included charges that surprised even me. Apparently, Rebecca had been embezzling money not just from Kohl Technologies, but from 2 previous employers as well. She was a career criminal who had targeted wealthy executives for years, using romantic relationships to gain access to company resources. Adrienne wasn't her first married victim. She had a pattern of seducing married businessmen, getting herself hired at their companies, stealing money, and disappearing when the relationships ended. The FBI had been tracking her activities across multiple states for over 2 years. This revelation added another layer of cynical manipulation to Adrienne's downfall, showcasing how he, the manipulator, had also been manipulated by a more seasoned professional. The revelation that his precious Rebecca was a professional con artist hit Adrienne harder than all the financial and legal problems combined. According to my email monitoring, he spent Wednesday night drinking alone in his office, sending rambling messages to his lawyer about how he had been manipulated and deceived. The self-serving delusion, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, was a striking aspect of his character. Thursday morning brought the final blow. Federal agents arrested Adrienne at his home on charges of tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. The arrest warrant detailed 8 years of criminal activity, totaling over $12 million in stolen funds and unpaid taxes. I watched the news coverage from my small apartment, finally allowing myself to feel satisfaction as Adrienne was led away in handcuffs. The confident CEO, who had called me dead weight, was now facing 30 years in federal prison. The news report mentioned that Adrienne's wife had been previously terminated from the company amid management changes, but didn't make the connection between my firing and the subsequent investigation. To the outside world, I was just another casualty of Adrienne's poor business decisions. Kohl Technologies officially declared bankruptcy on Friday morning. The combination of criminal investigations, client departures, and system failures had made the company financially unviable. Over 200 employees would lose their jobs, though most of them had already found new positions elsewhere, thanks to the gradual nature of the company's decline, which gave them time to transition. The bankruptcy filing included a detailed inventory of company assets, which would be sold to pay creditors and legal fees. Adrienne's personal assets had been frozen by federal authorities, including the house where we had lived together and all of his luxury cars. Friday afternoon, I received a call from Jennifer Walsh, the board member who had led the investigation into Rebecca's crimes. "Zara, I wanted to reach out and apologize. The board realizes now that your termination was completely unjustified. Adrienne's actions were motivated by his personal relationship with Ms. Hayes, not by any legitimate business concerns." I appreciate you saying that, Jennifer. We're all deeply sorry that you got caught up in this situation. If there's anything we can do to help with your career transition, please let us know. Thank you, but I'm doing fine. I've actually started my own consulting firm. That's wonderful. I'd love to discuss some potential projects with you when things settle down. The shift in tone, the recognition of my true worth, was a quiet triumph. After hanging up, I walked to my window and looked out at the city where I had spent 8 years building someone else's dream. Adrienne's empire was gone, reduced to bankruptcy paperwork and federal criminal charges. Rebecca was in jail awaiting trial. The company that had fired me no longer existed. But I was still here, still standing, still moving forward. Saturday morning, I received one final message from Adrienne. He had somehow gained access to a phone in federal custody and sent me a single text. "I know it was you." I replied, "Good luck proving it." Then I blocked his number and deleted our entire conversation history. Adrienne Cole was no longer my problem. He was the federal government's problem now. The feeling of absolute closure, of detaching from his toxic presence, was immensely liberating. Sunday evening, I sat in my small apartment reviewing job offers from 3 different companies and 2 consulting opportunities. My reputation in the tech industry hadn't been damaged by Adrienne's downfall. If anything, people seemed to view me as another victim of his criminal behavior, one who had emerged with integrity. I had emerged from the wreckage of my marriage and career with my professional integrity intact, my technical skills in high demand, and a growing bank account from my consulting work. Adrienne, meanwhile, was facing decades in prison, complete financial ruin, and the knowledge that the woman he had betrayed was now thriving without him. Justice had been served, and it was more satisfying than I had ever imagined. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of my new company, Zara Thompson Cybersecurity Solutions, looking out at the team of 12 brilliant engineers I had assembled from the wreckage of Cole Technologies. Sarah from accounting had joined as my CFO. Tony from security was now my head of physical security operations. 3 of Adrienne's best developers had signed exclusive contracts with my firm. We had just closed our biggest deal yet, a $2 million contract with Morrison Financial to rebuild their entire data management infrastructure. The same company that had lost millions when Cole Technologies' systems crashed was now paying me to fix the problems I'd created. The irony was perfect, the full circle of consequences. The Morrison contract puts us at $8.7 million in signed business for our first 6 months, Sarah announced to the team. We're officially profitable and ahead of all projections. Applause filled the room. These people had lost everything when Adrienne's empire collapsed, but they had landed on their feet with better jobs, better pay, and equity stakes in a company that actually valued their contributions. I had kept my promise to protect the innocent employees who had suffered because of Adrienne's crimes. Every person who had worked directly with me at Cole Technologies had received job offers from my new company or recommendations to other firms. None of them had been unemployed for more than 2 weeks. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Cole Technology CEO Adrienne Cole, sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The accompanying article detailed his conviction on all charges: tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. The judge had called his crimes a betrayal of the employees and investors who trusted him to act with integrity. Rebecca Hayes had been sentenced to 8 years in prison after pleading guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges spanning multiple companies. The article mentioned that she was also facing charges in 3 other states for similar crimes against other executives. Adrienne's sentencing hearing had been closed to the public, but according to court records, he had attempted to claim that he was the victim of a sophisticated sabotage campaign by a disgruntled former employee. The judge had dismissed these claims as desperate attempts to avoid responsibility for his own criminal actions. I forwarded the news article to my team with a note. Justice served. Now, let's get back to building something better. Let's count. That evening, I drove to the Harbor restaurant where Adrienne and I had celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary. It seemed appropriate to close this chapter of my life in a place that held memories of happier times. I ordered the same wine we had shared that night, a bottle of Cis Cabernet that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. Back then, I had felt guilty about the expense. Now, I could afford it easily without a second thought, without a shred of guilt. My phone rang as I was finishing dinner. The caller ID showed a number I recognized. Adrienne's mother calling from the federal prison where she had been visiting her son. "Zara, I hope you don't mind me calling." Mrs. Cole had always been kind to me, and I could hear the pain in her voice. "Of course not, Mrs. Cole. How are you holding up?" "Not well, as you might imagine. I visited Adrienne today, and he's not doing well in prison. He keeps saying that someone destroyed his company deliberately, that he didn't do anything worse than any other businessman." The delusion, it seemed, persisted even behind bars. "I'm sorry he's having a difficult time, but he did commit serious crimes." "I know that. I'm not defending what he did, but Zara, he keeps mentioning you. He seems to think that you were involved in exposing his illegal activities." I took a sip of wine and watched the sunset over the harbor. "Mrs. Cole, I was fired from that company and divorced by your son. I had no access to company information and no ability to influence any government investigations. I maintained my plausible deniability, a carefully constructed shield. That's what I told him, but he's convinced that you somehow orchestrated his downfall. He talks about it constantly. Adrienne needs to accept responsibility for his own actions. Blaming other people isn't going to help him adjust to prison or rebuild his life when he gets out. You're right, of course. I wanted to ask if you could visit him. Maybe if you talked to him, he could find some peace and move forward." The request was so absurd that I almost laughed. Adrienne wanted me to visit him in prison so he could continue trying to blame me for consequences of his own crimes. It was a final, desperate attempt to exert control, to rewrite history. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cole, but I don't think that would be helpful for anyone. Adrienne and I are divorced. We have no relationship anymore." "I understand. I just thought, well, you loved him once." "I did love him, but the man I loved never existed. The real Adrienne Cole is exactly where he belongs." After ending the call, I sat in my car for a few minutes processing the conversation. Adrienne was spending his days in federal prison, obsessing over me, trying to convince himself and anyone who would listen that I was responsible for his downfall. In a way, he was right. I had gathered the evidence of his crimes, provided it to federal investigators, and systematically destroyed his company through technical sabotage. But the crimes themselves, the tax evasion and embezzlement and fraud, those were entirely his choice. I had simply made sure he faced consequences for actions he had already taken. My role was that of an enabler of justice, not the instigator of his criminality. A year later, I was featured on the cover of Tech Entrepreneur magazine as Cybersecurity Executive of the Year. The article described how I had built a successful company from nothing, assembled a world-class team, and earned the trust of major corporations across 3 industries. There was one paragraph about my previous employment at Cole Technologies, describing me as another victim of the company's criminal leadership who had risen above adversity to build something better. The journalist had asked about Adrienne during our interview, wondering if I felt vindicated by his conviction and imprisonment. I had simply said that I didn't spend time thinking about the past. I was too busy building the future, which was true. Adrienne Cole was no longer part of my life in any meaningful way. He was just a cautionary tale about what happens when people mistake power for wisdom and cruelty for strength. I kept the magazine cover in my office, not as a symbol of revenge, but as a reminder of what was possible when you refuse to let other people define your worth. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of self-definition, and to the strength found in adversity. 2 years later, Sarah knocked on my office door with a bottle of champagne and a huge smile. We just signed the Peterson Industries contract, $18 million over 3 years. Peterson Industries, another former Cole Technologies client that was now paying my company to provide the services Adrian's firm had failed to deliver. We were literally profiting from his mistakes while providing better service at competitive prices. That puts us at $43 million in annual revenue, Sarah continued. We're officially one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms in the country. That evening, I treated my entire team to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city. 47 people who had built something extraordinary together, who had turned professional catastrophe into personal triumph. During the toasts, I thought about Adrian sitting in his prison cell, probably still convinced that his downfall was someone else's fault. He would be eligible for parole in 18 years, assuming good behavior. By then, he would be in his 50s, his prime earning years gone, his reputation permanently destroyed. Meanwhile, I would be running a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, employing thousands of people, and protecting businesses from the kinds of threats Adrian had never understood. I raised my glass to the team that had helped me build this new life. To second chances, I said, and to proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. The story of my marriage to Adrienne Cole had ended in betrayal and divorce, but my story, the story of Zara Thompson, entrepreneur and cybersecurity expert, was just beginning, and it was going to be magnificent.